All right, welcome back to another episode of This Week in Photo. I'm your host, Frederick Van Johnson. Today, we're going to give you guys some insight. We've got a player that is smack dab in the middle of the photography industry has decided and agreed to join me on the show to talk about some of their findings with regard to what the heck is happening or has happened in the photography industry. How has it evolved? Has it gone left? Has it gone right? Has it gone up and down? Whatever. We're going to talk about that. And here to talk about it are some senior executives from a little company you may have heard of called Zenfolio. John and Pamela, welcome to the show, guys.
Hey, Frederick. Thanks. Great to be here.
Yeah, it is good. You're completely welcome. Thank you for doing this. I know time is short, and I want to make sure we maximize all your time on this show. Let's just do some introductions before we dive in. Pamela, let's start with you. What is your major function at Zenfolio?
Absolutely. So I'm in charge of all things customer support, customer success. I lead an amazing team who are primarily photographers themselves, which really makes us unique in that when we're talking to photographers and helping them with their business, we have a really unique point of view of completely understanding what it's like to be a small business owner and to be a photographer with clients having certain expectations.
Yeah. And those expectations change a lot, right? As the industry shifts and changes. I've been in it for a couple of decades now, and a lot of things has changed, which we're going to talk about in this interview. So,
absolutely. I mean, I think about when I got married and how long it was to get my wedding photos back, and now it's very common in wedding photography to even have pictures of the ceremony showing during the reception on it as a slideshow. So it's kind of like that's gone from an 8-week lead time to you need to be ready instantaneously, and that's photographers are having to adapt.
Yeah. We'll talk about all that. John, I think you work at the company as well, right? What are you doing over there?
Most days. I'm lucky. I'm the CEO of the company, and one of the real joys is obviously helping people practice their art and build their businesses, but it's also the day-to-day of working with just a great team, and Pam is at the top of the list, and we're excited to have a chat with you.
Yeah, I'm excited too. Like I said, this is a treat. This is because it's interesting that we're talking about having a state of the industry discussion. Annually, I survey my audience, the This Week in Photo audience, just to see who's listening, what the demographics are, the general makeup. And I'm curious to see if it was a very short survey, right? I think it was 5 or 6 questions. So I'm curious to see if my findings mirror what you guys found. So let's segue that into this discussion on the state of the industry. Your teams ran a program or a survey to kind of get the feel of what, kind of like what I did, but on a grand scale. What were the initial findings from that?
Well, I think that we're always dipping in and trying to assess, who's using our services, and because we're a broad-based platform for photographers, generally pretty representative. I think there's a macro view here, and then I want to talk specifically about a survey that we ran at the beginning of February that really focused on how COVID impacted both the work of our subscribers during 19 and the first 2 months of 20, and then very interesting what we've seen happen beginning in March. But first, back to this macro picture, I think that there is absolutely a shift underway. I mean, historically, we've seen a majority of folks that self-define as professional photographers as being male, and typically shooting 3 to 5 genres of photography, and generally making a clear distinction between photography and videography, and not a lot of crossover. We started looking at this question of what does the next generation of photographers look like about 2 years ago, and we did it because we wanted to be sure we were ready for them.
Sure.
And And what we have found, and I think to some extent this mirrors what PPA has seen in some of their survey data, but if you're under 35 and a professional photographer, you're a much higher probability that you're female than male. And so there's a gender shift that is and has occurred where you've got a lot more women entering the industry and becoming professional photographers. I think the other issue is that we've seen is there's much less demarcation between still photography and videography. This 35 and under photographer is very comfortable with both mediums, which is a distinction. And the other thing we see is that, and I'm sure you hear it from your listeners, is that in the old days, the barriers to entry for a photographer were substantial. I mean, even a serious hobbyist, the investment in equipment was substantial. Today, it's the investment in a smartphone, and when you've got a cover of Vogue being shot by a photographer that started on his iPhone. It was the Beyonce cover, as I recall. I mean, it's quite amazing, the shift. And so that's in a large sense that there is a shift. It's becoming more female, more comfortable with multiple formats, and this ability to pivot from the most exquisite, expensive, perfect equipment to something that you can pick up virtually in any retailer or an Apple store. And so those are the big trends. But I do want to reference what we saw, because our own business went through a roller coaster in 2019. As everybody remembers, COVID sort of gripped the imagination of the American public, early to mid-March, and it was in mid-March here in California, one of the first states to start shutting things down in terms of businesses and gatherings. We saw our business in terms of e-commerce activity between March and June drop a full 60%.
Oh,
and yes, that's what we said too, and that's what our owners said. Ooh, wow!
I'm guessing because weddings, right? Is it mainly because weddings?
Well, it's all the things that that stopped. I mean,
kids' sports were shut down.
Yeah,
schools were shut down. No spring photos. Yeah,
school photos. I mean, everything. And so we went through this roller coaster, and we did as last year progressed. Across the calendar months, we started to see a recovery, and we did a whole series of things to help our photographers. We can talk about that. Sharing best practices. We did a lot of additional selling workshops, helping our photographers pivot. For example, we began to emphasize how to think about shooting and using the output for wall art and home decor. You wouldn't ordinarily do that, but a whole series of things. We expanded Mother's Day and Father's Day campaigns. One of the most interesting things we did is we have 4.5 billion images in our archives. That's what we hold for our photographers. So it's a chunk of data.
Yeah.
And we know that 6 months go by, and the need to dip back into that archive for a photographer diminishes for most. We did a whole promotion about tapping into your archive, your personal archive, pulling up images for key clients to commemorate anniversaries, birthdays, special events that you had previously shot. And obviously, for all the material you shoot, what you actually print and deliver is a fraction of it. We'll go through that archive, find those things that are still incredibly compelling, share it with your clients. And boy, we saw a real lift in e-commerce. That helps us, but more importantly, in a period where face-to-face shooting had stopped, this was a way for photographers to re-engage and generate some income. But my point here is that 19 was a roller coaster. We came out of it in November and December, starting to see a real recovery. Our business was still off in the 20 to 30% range, but much better from the low of about 60. And I'm talking now about commerce. And we said, well, gee, if this has affected us in this way, what's happened to our photographers? How do they see it? And how do they see the future? And we did this survey. It was just a 24-hour survey in early February. We generated about 302 responses, and the findings, were fairly both instructive and scary, and it provoked questions about the resilience of individuals to maintain their small businesses. But I think the top line is that out of the survey, 63% that took the survey, 63% saw a greater than 40% decline in their 2020 and their 2019, their 2020 business.
And that's crazy. COVID. Yeah.
I mean, that's devastating. And, it really, as you might suspect, it hit certain segments of photographers harder than others, and depending on genre. And the hardest hit, at least in terms of the 10 or 12 genres that we asked people to comment on, were clearly wedding photographers. Wedding photographers, took it on the chin in 2020. Almost more than 70% said that their business had declined more than 40% in 2020.
It makes sense.
It
makes sense. I mean, till death do you part. You want to say that, but not experience it.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And the flip side, interestingly enough, is that photographers that specialize in landscape photography and fine art saw the still an impact, but a much, much, much less severe decline in their business. And a much greater number said that their business really had not deteriorated. I mean, it's still a 20-25% said their business was about the same. But that's remarkable when you think about, the number of, for example, wedding photographers that had a true.
That begs the question. Is this a learning experience? Because for example, if we look at Texas as an example, and the recent news about them getting hit by that storm and the power outages, and they weren't ready and all that for various reasons, and now they're learning, and this may happen again, so maybe we should take steps just in case it happens again. In this situation, are we seeing the same kind? Do you think we're going to see the same kind of response from photographers that say, hey, the corona, that was COVID-19. There may be a 2021, 22, whatever. So I need to be ready and weatherproofed for this next calamity. Are we seeing that?
I think we saw some diversify. Restaurants started doing a lot of takeout, so they needed food shots. There was online e-commerce that people needed product photography. You couldn't go into a house to look at it to buy. And so the real estate photography became even more important. And so we saw a lot of photographers who maybe didn't typically go into those genres start expanding their craft so that they could bring in income. I think they needed to. It's kind of like, a farmer who only plants corn and has the entire crop get decimated by a parasite of some sort. They need to start thinking about, do they need to diversify so that they can weather the unexpected?
It's nature, right? I mean, it's natural selection by process of evolution, right? Survive or die. So, go ahead, John.
These folks are small business people. I mean, as much as they're, they see themselves as creatives and artists, and they are. The reality is the vast majority of our customers are running small businesses. And so this need to pivot quickly. And we saw that, that example of, we just pointed out, you've got all these images in our archive, figure out how to use them. And we gave an example or two, but the volume of activity was dramatic. I mean, it shifted the numbers. in a very good way, and it generated some income. And so I do think that photographers are incredibly resourceful, and those that are serious, are always thinking about how do they develop their business. One of the things that we see happening is photographers are paying more attention to both trying to reach new customers, leveraging particularly social media, and the visual social media. It's the Facebook and Instagrams and Snaps of the world, particularly Instagram, on the one hand, but on the other hand, cultivating existing customers, keeping in touch with them, both in the hopes that they may, decide to do a shoot, but also in the sense of being able to tap into stuff you've previously created for that client and market it in another form or format. And so I do think, to your question, there's been a recognition that the rug can very easily get pulled out from under you, and you just want to be.
You got to survive. It's from a photographer standpoint, or just from a marketer standpoint, it's having multiple forms or various forms of revenue streams coming in. So if one dries up, you're not living under an underpass or something. You have that peace of mind. Yeah, exactly. Pamela, I'm curious about the internals. You're in charge of the customer success area. What kinds of questions were you getting, or feedback were you getting from customers that were in this freak out mode and seeing their businesses dry up? Were they reaching out for ideas, or was it more complaining? Like what did it look like?
It was interesting. I mean, just when sales were dropping, our volume in the support center was increasing because photographers suddenly had time. Generally they're gearing up in March and April, and they had time, and they wanted to refresh their websites. They wanted to maybe learn how to set up e-commerce on their sites for the first time. And so our success team did one of those quick pivots and instantly started offering more classes, whether they were one-on-one or group, on how to set up e-commerce best practices. We were really talking to photographers about social distancing with photography once things started progressing to the stage where that sort of thing was allowed. Yeah. So we were definitely hearing it. We helped a photographer, like John had said, go back into their archives. I mean, yeah, you couldn't get Mother's Day photos this year, but how fun is it to do the last 5 years? If you're somebody that's been a photographer's client consistently, I get suckered with my iPhone tells me about my memories, and I see my kids when they were 4 years younger and really different. And photographers were using the same thing. Hey, look at how cute your kids were 4 years ago. Don't you want to buy some photos, refresh those walls, even though we can't do new photos this year?
Yeah. And we did a lot of stuff that's new too. I mean, the whole concept of porch photography took on a whole nother dimension. But interestingly, Frederick, so, the whole industry, at least our world, really got crunched. In February, when we did the survey, we asked people what their feelings were about the months ahead. And we said, essentially between February and June, tell us how you think things are going to progress. And about a third said that they thought their business would get stronger. 40% said it would remain about the same, still weak relative to prior years. And 25%, a full quarter, said they were terribly concerned that the business would continue to decline, to get worse. Yeah. And, that was sort of sobering. And as I said, we plan to run this survey now every quarter, and we're happy to come back and chat with you. But what we began to hear from customers, from our subscribers, our photographer customers, is that, and it was largely, informal via customer service. I'm seeing some bookings pick up. Things are feeling a little better. Just tonally, there was less desperation and more hope. Yeah. One of the things that we look at is one of our leading indicators for our business is how many photos are being uploaded in any given period, in a given month. uploads generally are a precursor to commerce activity. And so what we began to see is an uptick. And I don't want to misspeak, so I want to reference the stats. We began to see an uptick in uploads, and this started in March. March was down versus the prior year. But when we look at March and April of this year, 2021, it's still off about 30% from last year in terms of uploads. And we're uploading, anywhere from 20 to 40, 20 to 50 million photos a month this time of year. But when we look at April, the month of April of this year is now running 90% higher in terms of uploads of photos than a year ago, April.
It's playing catch up.
This is the proverbial hockey stick. I mean, it is not a slow sort of incremental, increase in the slope. This is a hockey stick straight up. And we're also seeing it in commerce revenue. Just this last week, we look at our receipts every week. This last week, our receipts not only were substantially greater than a year ago, for the first time, we lapped 2019. And so again, for us, it's good news for our business, but I think more importantly, and for your audience, what we see happening is photographers are going back to work.
And that's the big question, that literally at this point in time, as we record this, it's April 27th, 2021, and we are, it feels like, not having the data that you have, but it feels like things are thawing. We see bad news. We're still seeing bad news around the world in India, et cetera, but it feels like we're not out of the woods yet, but at least there's a little pinhole of light at the end of the tunnel.
We're seeing hope. We're seeing some sports teams are getting back onto the field, so the photographers are there. We're seeing in-person classes, so school photos can happen. I had one newborn photographer say, well, the quarantine babies are starting to be born. So she's basically seeing her own personal baby boom. A lot of the weddings that were supposed to take place last year, there's this pent up demand. People don't want to wait forever. And as soon as restrictions are open enough in their area and people are getting vaccinated and, the weather's getting nicer, especially in my neck of the woods, people are starting to have those events where photography is going to happen. And the photographers are noting it. They're telling us that when we talk to them.
You think, I've got to think, yes, when this started going, the whole pandemic started, in my head, I was thinking event photographers are going to take it. They're going to get hit. No one wants to even leave their house, let alone think about gathering. And the people that do are looked at as irresponsible. We were in that era. So I knew event photographers were going to be highly impacted. But I also thought, which sounds like it's bearing out now, that people that postponed their weddings aren't gonna break up, right? They're not gonna not get married. At some point, all those people are gonna be looking for wedding photographers, and the events are gonna turn on again. And it's like movies. Everybody wants to go to movies now, right? It comes back, and so wedding photographers and event photographers enjoy the benefits of that because they've suffered. Right? So,
absolutely. I mean, that kind of demand. You're absolutely right. The demand didn't go away; it just got deferred, and we're hearing this. In fact, I was just looking at some stats because we service a lot of wedding photographers. It's an important component of our business. And IBIS World, which compiles industry stats, just came out with a study that said in 2020, the US market total wedding spending was about $55 billion. Their projection for 2021 is it's going to be up 33% to just a hair under $75 billion. A big chunk of that will ultimately translate, all the way through the process into the pockets, we hope, of photographers. But, and wedding photographers are still waiting. Weddings aren't back in full swing yet. There's always this, even with relaxation of restrictions on gathering and all the rest, you've still got to plan, find a date, all those things, even if you want to do it quickly. And so I think these folks still need to hear the message that there's hope. But it is right around the corner. It really feels that way. And I
think the other side of that, I wonder what both of you guys think about this hypothesis, is that during the pandemic, these event photographers were highly impacted, and a lot of them can't rebound or are gone. They've decided, what, I can't do this business. I'm shuttering that. I'm going back to corporate. So there's a lot. I think the result of that, it seems like there'd be a lot of business that needs servicing now when the industry rebounds. So maybe this is an opportunity for people that were thinking about starting businesses in photography to jump in now into these fertile waters.
I think we were incredibly fortunate in that as horrible as COVID has been, and as long as it's taken to see real light now at the end of this tunnel, the reality is we look at our subscription statistics. Our photographers, about a third pay monthly, about 2/3 are on annual plans, but they're constantly renewing each month. It's not as if everybody renews January 1st. So it's spread, our base of subscribers is spread pretty evenly. And, we were sort of holding our breath. What's interesting is, despite the plunge in commerce revenue, our subscriptions, actually, the cancellation rate, which has always been very, very low, declined about 30%. We anticipated that we might see a spike, and in the month of April a year ago, there was a tiny increase, but then it's dropped, and it's been the lowest level we have seen in the history of the company. I mean, sub 1%, which is exceptional for a subscription business. And I think what it says is these photographers were able to, to hang on. I mean, some did just fine. If you're in landscape or fine art, less of a pinch, than if you're a wedding photographer. But these folks buckled down, and they hung on. And thank God we're coming to the end of this. So we didn't see a lot of photographers in our world exit. But I do hope that the assertion that, gee, there's stuff that didn't get shot and it's going to come snapping back quickly is reality as we go through the next, 3, 6, 9 months. These people, their livelihoods depend on it. And so, we really, and that, I think this speaks to also our decision to, and I think we're going to chat a little bit about the new services that we've been introducing. In the midst of this pandemic, we came out with a service called Book Me, which is essentially contactless booking, and you can put a bug on any website if you're a photographer, and a customer can book a session or a package with you, all via online, and then it can be executed. We saw a huge uptake in that service, both the convenience, and it saves a lot of administrative stuff too. I mean, it's automated invoicing and payments and collection and all those kinds of things that speed the process. But we've been innovating, and it's to this, speaks to this both need to help photographers stabilize and grow their business now. But I hope Pam will talk a little. In the last month or so, we've introduced 2 new tiers of service on our platform, and we did it from a timing perspective precisely because we think there is pent-up demand, that people that have been thinking about dipping their toe into photography, either as moving from an avocation to a vocation, this is the moment when they may be ready to do that. We wanted a suite of services that really speak to that nascent professional and the growing professional. And so we've introduced 2 new tiers of of service, precisely because we think the timing is great going into a period when people are going to come, back into the industry in meaningful numbers.
Yeah, I think it seems like you would see that influx of people coming back into the industry, and like I said before, new people coming in to fill any gaps that were left by people exiting the industry. But I think another facet that might happen are people that have seen, or maybe their primary source of income has slowed or gone away, and they're thinking, you know what, I got to have a supplemental. I got to have some cushion here. I love this photography thing. Maybe I could make a go of that as kind of a backup to my primary source of income. And
Absolutely.
maybe that, have you seen that? You think that, Pamela, as well?
And I think that, it was something that I personally went through when I started photography full time. Was I was laid off from a job, and it was horrible to happen, but it was like the little push that I needed to do what I had been wanting to do. And I think that we are seeing photographers who maybe lost their jobs, their day jobs, during this pandemic, or maybe they're not tied to a geographic location because their partner, is no longer needing to go to an office. And so they have a little bit more freedom to kind of enter into things that they have been wanting to do, but the time wasn't right. And, why not take advantage of, this situation and do your own personal pivot and do what makes you happy. I think we're seeing that. We're seeing people who, we're either doing this part-time on the side, or we're just really dreaming about it, thinking, you know what, maybe this is the universe telling me that it's time to try.
Yeah. Or, you know what, I could never do that because I have 9-hour days that are bookended by an hour and a half commute. There's no way that I can do that. But now I'm working from home and I make my own schedule. Maybe I could make a go of this thing because I have a little bit more flexibility. So yeah, that's really interesting. Is that, as I want to transition this into just kind of the new products that you guys are working on the service side and other, what just to wrap it up, what are the main learnings? If you had to write it on a whiteboard, what would be the main thing that came out of the information that you've culled from the survey?
I think it is about doing everything that we can to help photographers think creatively about their business. By definition, they create amazing compositions. That's in their nature. Our job is to support that, and the best thing we can do is to give them tools and ideas and capabilities as a function of the platform to enable it. And you talked about it. It's and Pam referenced it. I've historically shot portraiture and newborns, and that stopped. So you know what, I'm going to look at real estate, and I think what we can do is highlight the incredible breadth of opportunity there really is. I think we all get stuck. I get stuck. This is the way we do it. This is the way. This is the way we're going to have a staff meeting. If there is any bright side, and I say this with real respect for people that suffered horrible losses with COVID. But if there is any lining to this tragedy, it's this notion of resilience and pivotability and stick-to-itiveness. Don't give up. And our job is to give folks those resources to keep going and get through the bad stuff, and then be ready to really flourish when markets come back. And I mean, that's what we're seeing. Frederick, that's what we're seeing. There is a resurgence, and it's great. The stats that I referenced, that's all good. But this is the way people make their living. This is the way they put food on the table, the way they pay their rent or their mortgage. And right. So, I'm relieved that we're seeing an uptick, and our job is to create as much fireproofing as we can for the next potential jolt. Let's hope it never comes, but. You and I live in California. You know what they say. Do you have your earthquake kit? Well, you never know. And
It's right after the next fire, right? That's California. Yeah, it's California.
Really, photographers, recognize there are lots of ways to grow their business or to maintain their business during the lean times. I think that's what we learned.
Absolutely.
And I think that's one thing. One thing we learned was that photographers weren't idle. Just because they weren't taking clients, they were working on their business. And I think that's a really important thing, is that we continued to say, okay, so maybe you're not, bringing in clients and uploading photos, but what can we do to help you be ready when the demand starts to pick up? We wanted to make sure that we were priming them so that they weren't playing another catch up when clients were saying, okay, now we're ready. And these photographers were set up with their price list. They learned about marketing. They learned new genres. So they were busy getting ready so that when things were primed, they were ready.
You were building the boat, so when the water comes, you're ready to float, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So just as we get near the end of this discussion, let's talk about the new services that you guys have rolled out a little bit deeper. Pamela, what can photographers expect from Zenfolio over the next, year or so?
I think that they can expect, us to be taking advantage of the newest, latest, and greatest technology. Zenfolio has been around for a while, and so we're going to be doing things that we couldn't do on the platform that was built on that older technology. We're doing things with machine learning and allowing photographers to be really mobile first. One thing that was really exciting is we launched this Portfolio Plus plan, and because it's the early days, I'm literally watching the data come in as it's coming in. And I saw a photographer sign up. She bought a plan. I said, okay, great. We got a photographer. And then within 30 minutes, she had uploaded her photos, created her website, set her prices, and she had a gallery ready to sell. She went from nothing to she's got things ready for her clients in less than 30 minutes. And it was amazing to watch. And that's what we're working on building more of, is things that are intuitive, quick. We know photographers are on the go, so they may not construct their whole website on a mobile phone, but they need to be able to do certain things on their phone, and they need to be able to do it quickly. So that's some of the highlights of what we're working on. I don't know if John has anything to add.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Pam, you said it well. I mean, we had an opportunity to rethink our platform, and it served us well. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of photographers have run their businesses and made a living using Zenfolio, and we call that platform classic because it is. But the reality is, as I said, we've got a new generation of photographers entering the market. They grew up with the iPhone and all that implies, meaning it's intuitive. You don't have to think about it. It's easy. It's fast. And as Pam said, there's there've been a series of advances in technology that are impacting lots of industries. I come from outside of photography. I've got enormous respect and have been a collector of photography, but didn't know the inside of the industry. I see it now. And what's curious is all those advances really have not been leveraged for photographers. And Pam just referenced it. For example, machine learning. What does machine learning really mean? Machine learning is things like facial recognition. And I know there are all kinds of privacy issues. We're super sensitive to those things. So please, when you hear that phrase, don't panic. We are incredibly respectful. And we have become experts, not just in the law, but in the ethics of it. But my point is that if you're a photographer shooting a wedding with hundreds and hundreds of guests, how cool to be able to say, I want to show the bride her photos, online and share it with her mother. And, here's a tool that instantly can sort thousands of photos and present the bride or the wedding.
I want that.
Or even if you're a guest, you care about what the bride looks like, and then what's the second thing you do? You want to see pictures of you. At least I'm not even good looking, so But my point is, facial recognition is an offshoot, and we've introduced that in both tiers of the new service, Portfolio and Portfolio Plus. Natural language search, meta tagging. We spend hours tagging photos. Some of the AI that we're now using, it's automating that tagging. So if you go to search for a photo of a red barn with a white fence, it literally is as simple as white barn or red barn, white fence, and you'll get everything you shot. Not like the old days where, well, what was the name of the client? What was the date? What was the location? All that stuff is instantly entered. So it's these both significant and more modest changes. But what does it do? It does two fundamental things, and this is what we're after. It's leveraging that technology, not for technology's sake, but to make the routine aspects, the drudgery of photography, substantially less for the photographer. Yes. It's to make the non-creative components easier and faster and simpler. The second thing we're after, and it goes to this audience, this new group of customers, new group of photographers with these expectations, and it has to be incredibly intuitive. Yeah. We have become, a completely visual society. The days of reading instructions are over. It's literally show and tell. And if you take a look at these two platforms, and this is the beginning of a series, these are the first two, Portfolio and Portfolio Plus. Ultimately, the Portfolio is for a new group of customers for us, and it is this aspiring professional. It's this nascent professional, somebody that's just dipping their toe in. The second tier is for a photographer that is actually shooting, selling, but still is probably in the first third of their career. It will be followed by subsequent tiers right up to the multi-photographer studio, or the photographer that's shooting, marathons, and uploading 40,000 images in an hour. So our objective is leverage the technology and make it incredibly seamless, absolutely intuitive, no barriers to getting started. And we think that's a wonderful thing for people thinking about moving from photography being a hobby to actually being a gig and making.
That's really smart. And I think you hit it on the head by reducing the friction. It sounds like what you're talking about, reducing the friction between, hey, I want to run a business, but there's all that other stuff and the labs and the galleries and all this. I just want to take pictures and make them look pretty in Photoshop or whatever. And you hit it on the head as well, John, about artificial intelligence. A lot of people get afraid of AI, but I think when used properly, AI's function is to do that grunt work. It's keep the garage clean the grout, clean out the gutters. It does all that stuff you don't want to do so that you can spend more time doing the stuff that you do want to do, like keywording. That's a task, right?
Yeah. And we're very lucky. I mean, Zenfolio has always been incredibly sensitive about protecting, a photographer's images. We moved our 4.5 billion images to the cloud, and it wasn't just one cloud. IBM is our principal cloud provider, but we have triple cloud redundancy. There's nobody else out there in our space that has triple cloud redundancy. There aren't a lot of players that have moved all of their content to the cloud. Why did we do it? It's more efficient, less friction. And ultimately, with the kind of redundancy that we've built in, it really does create a degree of protection. We layered on top of that because we know photographers are concerned, as we all should be, about the integrity of their data. We just installed across our 100,000 customer websites, more websites than that, 100,000 customers. Many have multiple websites, but the reality is we just put Cloudflare in. Cloudflare is the most sophisticated denial of service remedy out there. it absolutely blocks nefarious activity from occurring, not just on Zenfolio, but because that we could do easily. This is applied to your individual site. If you're a subscriber and you've got a branded site with your name on it, this protects you. And so, it just goes to this issue of how do we leverage advances in technology in a smart way, in a way that really does benefit our current customers, but importantly helps this next generation become more successful more quickly. And so,
with less friction.
And a good start at that.
Let's wrap up with just this final thought on longevity and reassurance. So back in 2019 and prior, Zenfolio went through some bumps in the road, and now it sounds like you guys have got everything going and strapped some SpaceX rockets and hit the go button, and you're moving forward. Give the people that are listening that are aware of that, that the sort of bumpiness that happened back in 2019 and prior, some reassurance that Zenfolio is going to be around to stay, and what measures are you making so that we the photographer that wants to put their eggs in your basket are sure that they're going to be there?
Yeah. Well, I think that part of it is acknowledging, what occurred in 18 and 19 was a giant wake-up call, and new owners, a firm out of New York, came in and purchased Zenfolio from its previous owners at the very end of the beginning of 18. I came on in the middle of 18. It became clear that if we were committed to this business, which we were, the owners put tens of millions of dollars into purchasing the company, a very substantial amount of money, that there were going to have to be meaningful changes and enhancements. And so maybe the best thing we can say is, look, people that stuck with us, we appreciate it, and we will always be indebted to them. We always will be, because there were some very tough days from a service perspective. It's not as if the system went down, but the response times and some of the bugs that manifested in a 15-year-old system with 4.5 billion images and a database that goes billions of lines deep, very hard to adjust. And we made the decision that we were going to stabilize that platform, which we have done. And you can talk to our customers. I hear from them. There's one favorite customer of ours who called me literally at about 2 o'clock in the morning, furious because he was on a job and had a process and couldn't. And he had my cell number and he used it, and that's fine. And 2 years later, fast forward, he called, and it was not 2 o'clock in the morning, but he said, I just want to tell you, I can't believe the change that's occurred. He said, I haven't had a slow response. I haven't had an issue getting out what I need. And he said, you've delivered what you promised. And part of that is stability and predictability on the core platform. What tells you we're going to be in this business for the long haul? We've just spent, I will lowball the estimate, but we have spent more than $20 million stabilizing the existing platform and building what you are now beginning to see in terms of Portfolio and Portfolio Plus. If we weren't committed to that, if we weren't committed to our business and to the subscribers and photographers that use us, there's no way our owners, who are financial folks, would have made that kind of investment. I'm going to be very clear. We're here to make a profit, but we want to do it in a way that is win-win. It's not about on the backs of our subscribers. It's about we help their business. If they're successful, we're successful. We made this investment because we want them to be successful. We're going to be here for the long haul. My personal objective is Zenfolio, when it was born back in 2005, 2006, it set the standard for the professional photography platform business. It really did. It is the granddaddy. We've got that opportunity, and I feel it's happening right now. We're reasserting that leadership position. We're going to set the standard for the industry, and we're accountable for it. I accept that. The good, the bad, and the ugly. This has been good. Thanks so much, Frederick, for giving us the chance to talk about what we're doing.
You are very welcome. You're very welcome. And those are some powerful words there. And those from the CEO, no less. I mean, I think if nothing else, folks that are within the sound of my voice should go check out zenfolio.com now, right? And if you're not a customer already, it's time to
We're
go
ready
take
to
another
earn
look.
people's business. We're ready to earn people's business. We get it.
Love
Absolutely.
it. Love it. Pamela, any last words before we end this discussion?
No, I really thank you for the opportunity to talk about both, what we've all weathered together over the last, 14 months or so, and what we're looking forward to. These are some exciting things. I've been with Zenfolio personally since 2012, and I weathered the storm that you were talking about with the performance not being what we wanted it to be. And I watched John and the rest of the senior leadership team come in and make that commitment to the platform and in the future. And it's exciting. It's exciting to see Portfolio and Portfolio Plus living and breathing and succeeding out in the wilds, and having photographers come on board and learn and grow.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, and anecdotally,
more to come, Frederick. Watch for an announcement at the end of May, and then another one. I hope my colleagues will kill me when I say this, but I'll just say before the wheat gets harvested in the Midwest, sometime this summer, another major introduction. So one at the end of May, one in August. So. Yeah,
so if photographers needed a data point to prove that the industry is alive and well, a 8-figure investment in infrastructure should be a big, big data point in that. So thank you.
Our owners remind me on occasion. They say, John, remember, we're a private equity firm. We're not venture capitalists.
So we'd like to make some money back, right?
Where we put those dollars, but it's going to show. Go out and look at Portfolio Plus. It's the beginning of the next generation of Zenfolio.
Love it. We'll leave it right there. I'll put the links to all of those places in the show notes and the blog post for this episode. So check that out. But if you just want to go over to Zenfolio, go over to zenfolio.com, and I'm sure they can get to those other properties from the front page, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Well, you two, thank you both for coming on. I appreciate your time, and it's very educational and exciting, and reaffirming my commitment to the photography industry, because it's not going away.
It is not going away.
Right. Yep.
Thank you, Frederick.
You have a good rest of your day. Thank you. This is TWiP.